Welcome back to the Dr. J vlog series. It's Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. Because it's Wednesday, we deal with the issue of emotional well-being and relationships. Let's jump right in, shall we? Today's talk is titled Don't Look Back in Anger, which I'm sure some of you will recognize as the title of an Oasis song. I thought anger would be a good place to start because of its potentially destructive force in so many people's lives, the mental health issues associated with it. So, if you could read my mind, to quote Gordon Lightfoot, well, that would be pretty scary. So I'm glad that you can't. I mean, unless you're a clairvoyant of some kind. On the other hand, you might be able to help. You could provide some advice, perhaps, or maybe you could help rearrange the furniture or do some decluttering or cleaning or fill in some holes with some spackle. I'm sure I could use some help. But we all could to varying degrees, right? We've heard the expression about needing some time away, especially if we're stressed out and we've had a rough patch or some bad things have happened or we've just had a long stretch of work and we need a break. But those breaks aren't always as timely as they should be. But we also sometimes talk about the idea of needing a break from others, from our loved ones. Even the person who has a perfect relationship, seemingly perfect relationship, or you see a couple that get along just swimmingly all the time, uh, surely from time to time they must get on one another's nerves and or they'll need a break from one another. So it's not unusual to expect that even in an otherwise extremely healthy relationship. And then there's the person with whom you spend the most time of all, and the person from whom you never get a break, yourself. It's kind of ironic if you think about it. You know, if everybody needs a break once in a while, do you ever need a break from yourself? I sometimes think I do, but maybe I'm mistaken or misguided in that regard. But of course, that's not possible, right? I mean, unless I have some kind of a psychiatric condition, or maybe if I were to try hallucinogens. But otherwise, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm stuck with myself pretty much 24/7. You know, I wake up in the morning, I see myself in the mirror, and I think, oh, you again. It's inescapable, right? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or that I have low self esteem or anything like that, but it is kind of interesting to think about this notion of needing a break or needing some time off, even from oneself. And for me, I liken it to my condition of tinnitus. So, this persistent ringing, this annoying and ever stronger sound that I've heard over the years that's ringing in my left ear in particular. And I've been, I've suffered from this for over 50 years. And I mean, don't get me wrong, people who have chronic conditions and pain conditions that are much worse. So I'm not trying to compare myself or make myself out to be some kind of a martyr, but it is quite annoying. And I have often wondered, geez, what would it be like if I could just live a day even without this constant ringing, this incessant laser sharp pitch that's piercing my left ear all the time? I don't know what that would be like. I can't remember what life is like without the tinnitus, as it were. But more to the point here, if you could actively and consciously choose your emotional state from moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, week to week, what would you choose? Presumably something more along the happiness side of the spectrum, right? Or certainly I mean, I can't imagine that you would choose to be angry as your dominant MO, or anxious or sad, would you? So let's talk a little bit about anger and frustration. We all get anxious, we all get frustrated from time to time. Things don't go as planned. People don't live up to our expectations, perhaps. Pets misbehave, or maybe we get frustrated at our own screw ups. So everyday experiences are going to produce some degree of frustration. We all know that. And left unattended, though, our concern here is that what if this leads to something worse? Some kind of persistent or long-standing anger. Right? Now, let me be clear. At the simple descriptive level, we can probably all agree that anger is a natural human emotion, a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. That's according to the experts, the psychiatrists and psychologists, of which I'm certainly not one. So we generally agree, though, that anger is definitely a basic human emotion, like happiness or sadness or disgust or anxiety, and so on. And you've probably heard this common notion then that the human emotions themselves are neither good nor bad, right? They're simply responses to internal or external cues, possibly warning signals, and likely tied to our very survival. So let's not be too quick to judge anger. And indeed, it's our judgmental side that's often responsible for creating so much of the anger within us in the first place. So what are you saying? You're not allowed to be judgmental? We can't have expectations of others? Do we just sit back and let things happen? Never react or respond? No, not at all. We all have needs and expectations and preferences and desires and so on. And in general, we'd all like life to unfold in positive ways. For most of us, we want good things to happen, for things to run smoothly and so on. So when they don't go as planned, of course, we're going to have some kind of negative reaction. We're going to experience at least a little bit of frustration from time to time. And while the emotions themselves may neither be good or bad necessarily, my point here is, what if you could choose? The tinnitus isn't going to kill me. It's a bodily condition, it's a facet of my health. But if I could choose, I'd choose not to have it. And similarly, if I could choose, I would choose not to be angry. Perhaps you as well. I mean, I can accept being frustrated and even angry at times, but I'd rather not be, as a general rule. Does that make sense? So, um, what indeed, I look at it this way too. What productive or creative things do we ever accomplish when we're angry? Not much. I'm not saying expressions of anger don't have an impact, they certainly do. The effects, though, are almost always destructive in nature. Might take a physical form, of course, if you break something or punch a hole in the wall or hurt yourself or someone else through your actions. None of that helps, and in fact, can be quite costly financially, and to your own and to others' physical well being. And certainly, getting arrested doesn't help your cause either. But consider, too, of course, the damage that's done emotionally or interpersonally. You might think that yelling at someone might be the only way to get them to respond, to reach them, and so on. But the chances are they're, that by yelling at them, you're actually pushing them further away. You're compromising your ability to communicate effectively with them. In fact, they're probably looking at you more disturbed than ever because of your aggressive tone or even worse, obviously, your actions, your threatening actions, whatever form they might take. And again, I'm not saying we haven't all gotten angry with people from time to time. I'm certain that we all have. I mean, I'd be shocked if you never got truly angry at someone or a different situation. And I'm reminded, though, of a song or lyrics from Sarah Harmer, a Burlington native and musician, and probably her most famous song is titled "Don't Get Your Back Up." And she sings in that particular song where she's arguing with her partner the following. She sings, "I'm tired of the blame being put on my head. Your breathing fire's not bringing back what's dead." Hmm? In fact, just the opposite. Breathing fire leads to, well, it's a form of arson, right? And it leads to burning things down. So it's really powerful sentiment that she expresses. And in some ways, therein lies the irony, too, of unfettered anger. Because in the heat of the argument, what happens? A lot of times we get angrier and angrier, and maybe you want to impress upon the other what you're trying to say, your point of view, by raising your voice, by getting more aggressive. And yet, the angrier you get, the greater the likelihood that that person's tuning you out altogether, or dismissing you, or wanting to get away from you because they're fearful, or whatever the case may be. So then that makes you even angrier, and you get even louder. So it's a real catch-22, and it's not a positive. It almost never leads to a positive outcome. Now, if you've never lost your composure with somebody else, or never gotten into a screaming match with someone, well, then you're certainly a far better and more composed person than I am, or than most of us, right? Over the course of my own 6+ decades on the planet, I cannot count or recall the number of times I've had an angry encounter with a family member or loved one or a friend, perhaps. And certainly, usually, almost always, I wished I'd done or said something different, or that someone else hadn't done or said something to me. But it's difficult to track over the course of one's lifetime, and perhaps that's a good thing. The negative memories and associated feelings that we have are often suppressed, and that's viewed as often an effective coping mechanism. And so, speaking for myself, even though I have a pretty good memory, I am also glad that I don't have hyperthymesia, or the related highly superior autobiographical memory. Uh, it's a condition whereby people can remember abnormally large numbers of their life experiences in vivid detail. And in the most extreme forms, and there's only a handful of cases worldwide, as far as I understand, but in the most extreme cases, you could basically tell somebody a particular date years ago, or day of the week, whatever the case may be, and they can actually recall almost precisely what they were doing, minute to minute, hour to hour, what happened. And along with that recollection of what was happening, there are the associated emotional reactions and feelings that go along with that as well. So, again, for many of us, we probably don't necessarily want to relive certain moments, right? Especially those that are particularly painful or stressful, or where we've been angry, or where we've done something really stupid that we've regretted, and so on. But empirically, I do wonder, like, what if you could somehow calculate the number of times and or the total amount of time that you've spent being angry with someone, with a situation, with life, with God, whatever the case may be. Again, how much time would that be? What percentage of your time then essentially would have been wasted and your energy dissipating as a result of anger? And it's not just the immediacy of the argument or the fight that we're talking about either, because you have to factor in the aftermath as well. What are the longer term reverberations and consequences and lingering emotional negativity? How long does all of that stuff last and affect you adversely and continue to impact you and the other person? Well, again, these are interesting questions. Suffice it to say that, in my view, the larger the proportion of time that we spend when we're being upset and angry, generally speaking, that's going to lead to more unproductive outcomes and consequences, and even worse, highly destructive outcomes. And indeed, how many of us really feel a sense of pride or accomplishment when we've been in those states of being? Usually, we associate pride with positive events, personally fixing things that are broken, or finishing a difficult task, or acing an exam, or whatever. Basically, if you, or even interpersonally, I don't know about you, but don't most of us usually feel better if we help someone, or if we lift someone's spirits, or we do something that benefits them? Which do you prefer? So I think then there's always a better option. And indeed, that better option is to try to eliminate or reduce the numbers of times and the instances where we're feeling that extreme sense of frustration and even anger. And of course, then if we do feel that, we want to be able to manage those feelings more effectively. And so there are many possible strategies, some of which can be implemented almost immediately, and others that takes a lot longer time to develop or that we have to work at. Okay, and that's going to be our focus mainly next week, anger management strategies. So for today, there's of course a lot more that can be said about the topic and about emotional well-being in general, along with relationships. And so we're really just getting started. But I thought anger would be a good place to start because it's such a powerful emotion and often leads to destructive behavior towards others as well as to ourselves. So that's where we're starting. And speaking of places to start, I think probably the single best place to start would be to have an honest look at yourself and your long term patterns and tendencies. I don't know if it's because I was raised a Catholic, but I've long been aware of my many shortcomings, right? And this omnipresent sense of Catholic guilt. It's a lot like the tinnitus. It's just always ringing in my ears and in my soul. But also, you can look to your broader living situation, to your lifestyle, to your work routines, and your daily routines in general. Are there pressure points or high stress areas that undermine your ability to respond or to cope effectively? Just like we keep tabs on our bank accounts to make sure that we have enough money to pay the bills, I am amazed at how many people don't do a regular audit or accounting of their life circumstances to see whether there are surpluses or deficits in certain areas. And of course, if you're not very good at accounting, you can always go see an accountant. And the obvious metaphor here is to go see a counselor. If you're if you're having trouble looking objectively at your life or looking at ways to intervene effectively. Okay, so uh, we'll end there today. I'd imagine that most of us don't want to reach the end of our lives and look back on our lives in anger. So in the meantime, may you and yours create peace in your lives and nurture love in your hearts. And hopefully, we'll see you tomorrow, Thursday, and we'll start our deep dive into knowledge and science. Until then, take care.